Hi, my name is Alex Thompson, and I never imagined I'd be caught in a situation where the person I trusted most could betray me so completely. I'm 42, married for 14 years to my wife, Vanessa, and together we've built what I thought was a life of honesty, love, and stability. We have 2 kids, a cozy house in the suburbs of Seattle, and a marriage that looked perfect to anyone looking from the outside. But lately, I've started noticing small cracks that I couldn't ignore. Vanessa has always been confident, social, and charming. She's the type of person who can walk into a room and immediately draw attention, not in a flashy way, but naturally, effortlessly. I fell in love with her quick wit and the warmth she radiated, and for years, I thought our love would weather anything. But in the past few months, something has felt off. Little things, almost imperceptible, kept nagging at me: the faint scent of a perfume I didn't recognize, her sudden obsession with her phone, and a growing pattern of unexplained late nights. It started subtly. She would say she was meeting her friend Olivia for a casual dinner or a girls' night out, but sometimes she returned much later than expected, claiming traffic or extra errands. I didn't want to appear paranoid, so I dismissed these moments, chalking them up to overthinking. But the unease kept growing, settling in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. The first truly unsettling incident occurred on a Friday evening. Vanessa came home from work, but instead of heading straight to the kitchen like she usually does, she lingered in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "Alex," she said casually, "Olivia invited me to a small gathering tonight. I thought it'd be fun. I'll be back late." Her tone was light, almost playful, but there was a strange rigidity in her posture. "Another night out?" I asked, trying to mask the tightness in my throat. "You've been going out a lot lately." She shrugged, smiling faintly. "It's just a few friends. Don't worry about it." And with that, she left. I watched her walk out, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, and an unsettling sense of foreboding settled over me. I spent the next hour pacing, thinking through every possible scenario. Something in my gut told me this wasn't just a casual gathering. I tried to rationalize it, maybe I was reading too much into it, but deep down, I felt that something was about to change our lives. I checked my phone obsessively, waiting for a text, a call, anything, but none came. That night, I struggled to sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. I kept replaying her words in my mind: "It's just a few friends. Don't worry about it." The reassurance felt hollow, as if I could sense a truth she hadn't spoken aloud. My thoughts spiraled: was she being honest? Or was this a mask, a facade to hide something else entirely? By Saturday morning, the tension hadn't eased. She hadn't returned until the early hours, and when she did, her demeanor was oddly nonchalant. "Late night, huh?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, brushing past me to pour a cup of coffee, her casual attitude a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. There was something almost smug in the way she moved, the subtle smile that didn't reach her eyes. I felt a pang of betrayal before any proof existed, a raw, instinctive warning that I could neither ignore nor fully understand. In the following days, I began to observe small patterns: her phone buzzing constantly, quick glances at the screen whenever I entered the room, and casual mentions of places or people I didn't know. I didn't confront her yet, I needed to know before I acted. I began documenting everything, noting the time she left, returned, the locations she mentioned, and the inconsistencies I noticed. Something in me had shifted. I wasn't just worried, I was preparing. If she was hiding something, I intended to uncover it. Vanessa seemed completely unaware of my scrutiny, which only made me more certain that she was hiding something. I couldn't rely on assumptions alone, I needed concrete evidence. But even as I watched, I couldn't help feeling a sense of nostalgia, of longing for the trust that had once existed between us. It was like standing on a thin ice sheet, every move had to be careful, every emotion controlled, yet I feared that any moment, the ice might crack. Then came the subtle but undeniable clue: an unexpected expense on our joint account. A dinner at a restaurant I'd never heard of, with no mention from her. It wasn't extravagant, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions that something was being hidden. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were slowly forming a picture I didn't want to see. That evening, Vanessa returned home smiling, carrying a shopping bag. "Had a great time with friends," she said cheerfully, oblivious to the tension in my chest. I forced a polite smile, replying, "Glad you enjoyed yourself." Inside, though, I felt a mixture of fear and resolve. I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. I had to find out the truth before the situation spiraled further. In this moment, Alex's intuition highlights the tension between trust and suspicion in long-term relationships. The narrative demonstrates how small behavioral changes, like secrecy, late nights, and evasive answers, can serve as early warning signs of deeper issues. Alex's cautious observation and documentation reflect a desire to maintain control and prepare for potential betrayal, illustrating the psychological impact of uncertainty. His internal conflict shows how love and fear can coexist, emphasizing the emotional strain that arises when trust begins to erode. This stage of awareness is crucial, as it lays the groundwork for both eventual discovery and personal growth, demonstrating the interplay between vigilance and emotional preservation. The week following Vanessa's late-night outing felt like walking through fog. Each morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, unsure whether to expect her smile or her evasive glances. The children, Liam and Sophie, were blissfully unaware, bouncing around the house with the energy that only kids possess. I envied their innocence, but every time I watched them, I couldn't help but notice how strained our home had become, how much silence had crept into spaces that used to echo with laughter. Vanessa's behavior became increasingly peculiar. She would leave in the mornings under vague pretenses, claiming meetings, errands, or casual brunches with friends. I noticed she'd start keeping her phone with her at all times, screen face down, charging it in her purse. The subtle tension between us thickened. A casual question from me was met with a defensive shrug or a dismissive, "Nothing, just work." I began monitoring the patterns more systematically. I noted when she left, where she said she was going, and how long she was gone. Each small inconsistency, the extra hour here, the unexplained trip there, added fuel to the suspicion growing in my mind. It wasn't paranoia. My instincts told me that something was wrong, and I needed proof. At the same time, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. I made the kids breakfast, helped with homework, and tried to engage Vanessa in mundane conversations, hoping to catch a glimpse of her real self. But she seemed increasingly distant, her eyes often glazing over as if she were elsewhere. Sometimes, when I asked about her day, she would respond with vague statements or laugh off my curiosity. The warmth that had once defined her presence in our home seemed to be draining away, leaving behind a carefully maintained facade. One evening, I decided to take a closer look. Vanessa had told me she was attending a book club, something she rarely did, and would be home by 9. I waited until she left and then discreetly checked our shared bank statements. A few transactions stood out: a boutique she hadn't visited in years, a restaurant in downtown Seattle I had never heard of, and a spa appointment. None of these expenses were massive, but their timing and secrecy suggested she was intentionally hiding them. The tension in my chest grew. Each day, I replayed her words, her tone, the way she avoided eye contact. "It's just a few friends," she had said. But the inconsistencies no longer felt minor, they felt deliberate. I tried talking to her casually about weekend plans, subtly probing for details, yet she deflected with practiced ease. I realized that if this were truly innocent, her answers would have been effortless, not evasive. The following morning, I called my brother, Ethan, who had always been protective and pragmatic. "Ethan, I think Vanessa is hiding something," I confessed. "She's been late every night, acting strange, and there are charges on our account I can't explain." Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "You need to get the facts, Alex. Watch, listen, document. Don't jump to conclusions, but don't ignore the signs either." I followed his advice meticulously. Over the next few days, I jotted down every departure, every vague excuse, and cross-referenced them with transactions and her social mentions. The emerging pattern was undeniable. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to remain analytical. I wasn't going to confront her yet, not until I had something concrete. One evening, as she returned from a girls' night outing, she seemed more relaxed than usual, laughing with a friend's voice over her phone. I watched her from the doorway, heart racing. She didn't see me, lost in conversation. It wasn't just the extended time away, it was the confidence in her movements, the casual smile she gave me while putting her purse down. Something had shifted. She no longer appeared guilty, she seemed emboldened. Later that night, I found myself alone in the living room, reviewing my notes. Each entry told the same story: unusual expenses, unexplained outings, and a growing emotional distance. I realized the house I thought was my sanctuary had become a labyrinth of secrets. The trust one had placed in her felt fragile, threatened, and possibly irreparable. I remembered all the little signs I had dismissed: the sudden perfume, the phone buzzes, the laughter that didn't reach her eyes. In retrospect, the warnings had always been there, subtle and almost imperceptible, but they now formed a clear pattern of deceit. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided it was time to dig further. I knew I couldn't rely on instinct alone, I needed evidence. The next day, I discreetly checked the shared photo albums and social media tags, looking for inconsistencies or unfamiliar names. At first, there was nothing overt, just casual pictures and mundane posts. But then, a tagged photo caught my eye: Vanessa, smiling widely, with a man I didn't recognize, his arm around her shoulder. No mention of him in conversation, no casual introduction, it was like he didn't exist in the life she presented to me. My pulse quickened. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, but I knew the veil was lifting. I needed to prepare. Over the following days, I expanded my documentation, screenshots of her posts, times of departures, and the recurring names I didn't recognize. Each small discovery solidified my growing conviction: betrayal was no longer a possibility, it was reality waiting to be confirmed fully. The emotional distance had now infected every interaction. Vanessa spoke to me with politeness but no intimacy. Conversations were transactional, often superficial. I felt like a roommate, a shadow of the man I once thought was part of a united partnership. I began to see how neglect, whether emotional or intentional, can erode trust slowly until the foundation cracks entirely. And once you sense that shift, you can't unsee it. By the end of the week, the evidence was mounting. I realized that my role had shifted from passive participant in our marriage to an investigator, someone who needed to collect facts before taking action. My emotions oscillated between grief, anger, and a strange, cold resolve. I wasn't acting out of revenge yet, I was preparing for the confrontation that seemed inevitable. In this part, Alex's increasing observation and documentation highlight the psychological toll of suspected betrayal. The narrative illustrates how emotional neglect and evasive behavior can escalate mistrust over time. Alex's meticulous attention to inconsistencies reflects a desire to regain control while preserving his dignity. This phase emphasizes the emotional erosion caused by secrecy, as he balances caring for his children with the growing anxiety about his wife's actions. It shows that prolonged uncertainty in relationships can heighten vigilance and stress, compelling one to prepare for potential betrayal while grappling with feelings of grief and disbelief. By the beginning of the third week, I realized I could no longer rely on instinct alone. The uneasy feeling had grown into a constant tension, gnawing at me during every mundane task. I knew that if Vanessa was hiding something, I needed proof, something tangible that would confirm my suspicions. I also knew that confronting her without evidence could backfire, turning me into the unreasonable partner she could easily dismiss. One afternoon, while Vanessa was at work, I began reviewing her calendar and cross-checking it with my notes from previous nights. A pattern emerged. There were frequent references to lunch with Olivia or coffee with Emily, but the times and locations often conflicted with her social posts or shared expenses. The inconsistencies were subtle, but for me, they were glaring. I decided to take a cautious approach. I installed an app to track her phone location, not to spy obsessively but to have a record in case I needed it later. My heart thumped with guilt and anticipation. It felt invasive, yet necessary. I justified it as preparation, as protection of the life we had built, particularly for the kids. That evening, she came home later than expected again, her car parked across the street instead of the garage. I noticed the faint scent of a cologne I didn't recognize. Inside, she was cheerful, almost too cheerful, chatting about the fun group gathering she had attended. I smiled politely, but my mind raced. I needed confirmation. Later, after the kids were asleep, I reviewed her phone while she showered. Most messages were mundane, but one name jumped out, Nathan. I didn't recognize him. I scrolled cautiously through the chat history, careful not to disrupt anything, and saw a series of messages that immediately set off alarms. Friendly at first, but soon becoming more personal, dinner plans, laughter, flirty jokes that weren't shared with me. There were also photos of the two together in public spaces, smiling in a way that suggested intimacy. I felt the first real sting of betrayal. It wasn't abstract anymore. Vanessa wasn't just distant or evasive, she had formed a secret connection with someone else. My stomach twisted with anger, disbelief, and sorrow. For a long time, I sat frozen, absorbing the reality that the life I thought I shared with her was partly an illusion. The next morning, I tried to act normal. We had breakfast, talked about the kids, and carried out our usual routines. Vanessa seemed oblivious to my knowledge, laughing as she recounted trivial events from the night before. But every smile, every casual word, now carried a hint of duplicity in my mind. I realized that betrayal could be subtle, almost invisible, but its effects were deeply destabilizing. I began documenting everything systematically: screenshots, timestamps, patterns of messages, and financial discrepancies. I also made notes of her behavior, how she avoided certain topics, the subtle defensiveness in her tone, and how she seemed increasingly protective of her phone. Each detail reinforced what I already suspected: my wife had crossed a line, and I was determined to know exactly how far. A few days later, Vanessa mentioned meeting a friend at a new cafe downtown. I decided to follow discreetly, keeping a careful distance in my car. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. She entered the cafe with Nathan, laughing, leaning close to him, exchanging whispers. I could see the ease and familiarity between them, the casual intimacy that shouldn't exist in a married couple's lives. My hands clenched the steering wheel, and I felt a surge of conflicting emotions: rage, grief, and a strange clarity. That evening, when she returned home, I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I recorded my observations and added them to my growing dossier. I realized that evidence was my armor now. Confronting her without a clear understanding of her actions could escalate the situation in ways I wasn't ready for. I needed a plan, not an argument. Over the next week, I extended my documentation further. I cross-referenced social media posts, financial transactions, and text messages. The picture became undeniable. Vanessa had been building a separate narrative, a parallel life that she carefully curated to keep me in the dark. The person I trusted implicitly had been intentionally deceptive, and the consequences were already unfolding in the subtle shifts of our daily life: cold interactions, vague explanations, and a growing sense of estrangement. During this period, I also began reflecting inwardly. The betrayal was not just Vanessa's, it was a mirror of the complacency and assumptions I had held for years. I realized that trust is not passive, it must be maintained, nourished, and observed. I had overlooked early signs of emotional neglect, rationalizing her evasive behavior and ignoring minor inconsistencies because I wanted to believe in our perfect marriage. Now, facing proof, I understood that vigilance is a part of love, particularly when subtle shifts begin to erode it. The week ended with a confrontation I wasn't ready for. Vanessa came home late again, smiling, humming, seemingly content. I greeted her calmly, asking casually about her evening. She responded with her usual charm, oblivious to the storm I had been navigating. My resolve hardened. The time for casual observation was nearing its end. Soon, confrontation and clarity would become unavoidable. At this stage, Alex transitions from suspicion to active investigation, reflecting the psychological need for certainty in relationships threatened by betrayal. His documentation and observation serve as both preparation and protection, illustrating how trust, once eroded, necessitates vigilance. This moment demonstrates the duality of emotions he experiences: grief over the hidden intimacy, anger at the deception, and rational clarity that allows him to act strategically. The narrative highlights how the discovery of evidence shifts perception from anxiety to proactive planning, emphasizing the intersection of emotional resilience and analytical reasoning in confronting marital betrayal. By the start of the 4th week, I had accumulated enough evidence to face Vanessa. The careful documentation, the photos, messages, and bank records, all of it painted a clear picture. I knew the confrontation had to be calculated. I couldn't let my emotions dictate the moment. I wanted clarity, accountability, and an end to the secrecy that had poisoned our marriage. That evening, I waited until the kids were asleep. Vanessa returned from work, casually tossing her purse on the couch. She looked at me and smiled, but I didn't return it. "Vanessa," I began, voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." Her expression shifted instantly. "About what?" she asked, though her tone betrayed the slightest tension. I gestured to the folder I had prepared, sitting neatly on the coffee table. "This," I said. "All of it. The messages, the photos, the unexplained charges. I need answers." Vanessa froze. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then back to me. For a moment, I thought she might panic, deny, or deflect, but instead, she laughed softly, a nervous, brittle sound. "Alex, what are you doing?" she said. "I'm asking you to be honest," I said. "I've seen enough to know something has been happening behind my back." Her smile faltered. You went through my things." "Yes. And I wish I didn't have to. But the inconsistencies, the secrecy, the late nights, these aren't normal. Not anymore." My hands trembled slightly as I spoke, not from fear but from the intensity of suppressed anger and grief. Vanessa's posture stiffened. "Fine," she said finally, voice tight. "Yes. Nathan. I've been seeing him. But it's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, disbelief and fury rising in equal measure. "You lied for weeks. You've built a secret life while we were trying to keep this family together." "I needed something real," she said, her voice breaking slightly. I felt trapped. "You've been so busy with work, the kids, everything else, I needed attention." Her words stung, but I didn't let them sway me. I had expected justifications, excuses, and rationalizations. "Vanessa, attention doesn't justify betrayal. You chose secrecy. You chose lies. And now the consequences are here." We sat in silence for a long time. I could see the defiance, the guilt, and the flicker of regret all at once. But I couldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. My priority was clarity, truth, and the protection of our children. I calmly recounted each piece of evidence I had documented: the texts with Nathan, the photos of them together, the unexplained financial activity. Each revelation chipped away at any facade she might have hoped to maintain. As the night progressed, I continued methodically. I showed her the inconsistencies in her story, the pattern of deception that had unfolded over weeks. Her defensive walls began to crumble, her voice rising and falling in a mix of anger, fear, and pleading. "You're making this into something bigger than it is," she shouted. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I replied, calm but unwavering. "And now you have to face it." Over the next few days, I strengthened my case further. I consulted a family lawyer, Sarah, to understand my legal options and the potential implications for custody and property. I knew I had to protect myself and the children while also giving Vanessa the opportunity to take responsibility. Every conversation, every piece of evidence I shared, was catalogued carefully. Eventually, I filed for separation. Vanessa reacted with anger, disbelief, and attempts to manipulate the narrative. She posted vague, dramatic statements online, painting herself as the victim. I stayed focused on the facts, presenting the evidence to the lawyer and keeping communication concise, measured, and unemotional. It was painful to see someone I once loved attempt to rewrite the truth, but I understood that manipulation is a common response when guilt collides with exposure. Through this confrontation and legal preparation, I began to reclaim a sense of personal agency. I wasn't acting out of revenge, I was taking steps to ensure fairness, clarity, and protection. The betrayal had shaken the foundation of my marriage, but it also forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about expectations, complacency, and the importance of maintaining emotional vigilance in long-term relationships. The most difficult moments came in the presence of the children. Liam and Sophie noticed the tension, the hushed conversations, and the occasional frustration in my voice. I struggled with how much to reveal, how much to shield. I wanted them to understand honesty, integrity, and boundaries without being burdened by adult conflicts. It was delicate, balancing emotional honesty with protection from trauma. As Vanessa moved out temporarily, I felt a strange mixture of grief, relief, and empowerment. The house that once felt tense and deceptive now began to regain a sense of calm. I realized that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you, it can reveal resilience, determination, and a capacity to protect oneself and one's family while navigating heartbreak. In this part, the confrontation illustrates the psychological necessity of accountability in the aftermath of betrayal. Alex transitions from suspicion and investigation to active confrontation, highlighting how evidence-based clarity empowers decision-making. This stage demonstrates the interplay between emotion and rationality. Grief and anger coexist with strategic planning, showing how personal boundaries are reinforced. The narrative also underscores the challenges of balancing family responsibilities with self-preservation, emphasizing that empowerment emerges not from revenge, but from measured, informed action to reclaim control and integrity. The days after the court's decision brought a strange mixture of relief, exhaustion, and clarity. Vanessa was out of the house, her presence reduced to scheduled supervised visits with Liam and Sophie. The quiet that once felt oppressive now felt liberating. I finally had the space to think, breathe, and begin reconstructing a life that had been fractured by betrayal. I started small. I reorganized the house to create a sense of calm and stability. Each room became intentional, the kitchen a place for family meals, the living room a sanctuary for homework and evening stories, and my own office a retreat for reflection and planning. For the first time in months, I felt the freedom to exist in my space without tension lurking around every corner. Therapy became an essential tool. Talking with a counselor allowed me to untangle the complex emotions swirling inside, grief, anger, disappointment, but also gratitude for clarity and renewed strength. We explored how complacency in relationships can create cracks, even in marriages built on years of love. I began to understand that trust is an active practice, not a passive expectation, and vigilance is a form of self-respect rather than paranoia. The children adapted faster than I anticipated. Liam and Sophie were resilient, absorbing our routines and emotional cues with astonishing speed. I remained honest with them, in age-appropriate ways, about the changes in our family, emphasizing that both parents loved them but that honesty and respect were non-negotiable. Their laughter gradually returned to the house, a tangible reminder that life could regain its rhythm even after upheaval. I also started to reclaim personal time. Morning runs became meditative moments, where the weight of betrayal and anxiety gradually lifted. Evenings were filled with books, music, and small projects I had neglected over the years. The sense of empowerment grew steadily. I was no longer reacting to Vanessa's deception, I was creating a future on my own terms. Social connections, too, shifted. Friends who had been distant or unaware of the situation came forward, offering support, perspective, and solidarity. I learned that betrayal often isolates its victims, but reaching out creates bridges for healing and understanding. Conversations with Ethan, in particular, reminded me that family and loyal support networks can anchor you through even the most turbulent times. One afternoon, while reviewing old photos, I noticed the stark contrast between the early days of our marriage and now. The smiles, the shared adventures, and the intimacy we had once shared were genuine and beautiful, but the betrayal had altered the lens through which I viewed those memories. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about learning from it. Each memory became a lesson in vigilance, communication, and personal boundaries. Over time, I began to reflect more broadly on the experience. Vanessa's betrayal had been devastating, but it also illuminated essential truths about relationships and personal resilience. Emotional neglect and unaddressed dissatisfaction can fester if left unchecked. Secrets and deception, once introduced, erode trust rapidly. And yet, betrayal also forces introspection, revealing areas where personal growth is possible, where boundaries need reinforcement, and where agency must be reclaimed. I noticed changes within myself. I was no longer the passive partner who ignored subtle warning signs. I had learned to observe carefully, act decisively, and protect both my dignity and my family. Emotional strength, I realized, is not about suppressing pain but about using it as a catalyst for informed, intentional action. I could grieve without being paralyzed, feel anger without lashing out destructively, and rebuild without resentment consuming me. In practical terms, life stabilized. The house ran smoothly, work remained steady, and the children thrived. I maintained routines, engaged actively in their education and extracurricular activities, and fostered an environment where honesty and mutual respect were modeled daily. Every day, small victories, smiles from the kids, a calm evening meal, a quiet moment of reflection, reminded me that life could be rebuilt with intention. I also reflected on the broader implication of betrayal. It became clear that trust is both a gift and a responsibility. Maintaining it requires communication, transparency, and attentiveness. Betrayal, while painful, often exposes weaknesses and patterns that must be addressed, not just in the other person, within oneself. Awareness, self-reflection, and vigilance become tools to prevent repetition and foster healthier future relationships. Looking forward, I embraced a sense of empowerment that was previously foreign. I was no longer defined by Vanessa's choices or the deception she perpetrated. I had reclaimed control of my life, my home, and my emotional well-being. The experience, while painful, had strengthened my capacity for empathy, patience, and discernment. I had learned that betrayal does not have to lead to destruction, it can serve as a crucible for growth, clarity, and renewed purpose. In quiet moments, I would sit on the porch after the children were asleep, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, reflecting on the journey. I remembered the shock of discovery, the painstaking investigation, the confrontation, and the legal battles. Each stage had been a test of endurance, integrity, and strategic thinking. Yet now, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The future was unwritten, but I approached it with confidence, resilience, and a clear sense of self. Ultimately, betrayal is a brutal teacher. It forces its victims to examine assumptions, observe patterns, and act decisively. But it also offers the opportunity to emerge stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. I had been tested, and I had survived. I had not only protected my children and my dignity, but I had also gained a deeper understanding of trust, resilience, and personal boundaries. As the months passed, I realized something essential: life continues, and with clarity, honesty, and intention, it can thrive again. My story of betrayal had a painful beginning, but it culminated in empowerment, self-reclamation, and the knowledge that I could face challenges with courage and wisdom. I was no longer defined by deception, I was defined by my ability to rise above it. In the concluding part of the narrative, Alex achieves emotional and practical empowerment after betrayal. The story highlights the integration of personal growth, emotional recovery, and strategic action. By reclaiming agency, maintaining routines, and protecting the children, Alex demonstrates that betrayal, while deeply painful, can catalyze resilience, clarity, and self-determination. This final reflection underscores the themes of vigilance, integrity, and conscious rebuilding, showing that individuals can transform adversity into a foundation for a stronger, more intentional life.